So here we go. So Suicide Squad, much maligned, opened up. Was it like 6 weeks ago now? Like, I mean, sorry, 6 weeks, maybe 2 months ago now. It's been out. I wanted to wait for all the noise to die down to kind of address some of the issues with Suicide Squad. I also wanted to think about it for a while. I didn't want to just come in and say, oh, I wanted to make sure that when I made this video, I was being as little bias as I possibly can be. As I said, I'm a person who didn't like Man of Steel. I thought it was I think it's one of the worst movies, in terms of comic book movies of all time. I'm not going to go into why. I've got videos on it. Check them out if you want to. I think The Dark Knight Rises, I haven't even been able to watch it twice. I watched it once, and then I tried to watch it again, and I wanted to just leave it, because I never wanted to see it again, because it was just that awful. And again, I'm not going to go into it, but a lot of people seem to want to defend Man of Steel and Dark Knight Rises and claim that it's better than Suicide Squad and better than Batman v Superman, which is crazy. I'm going to go into that as well, because that's nuts. But I'll go into that very, very briefly. But let's start with Suicide Squad. This video is going to be dedicated 100% to Suicide Squad, and we're gonna break down all the criticisms. We're gonna follow all the main criticisms and look into it, see what it's all about. All right. Okay, this is gonna be fun. This is gonna be cool. This is gonna be great. So, Suicide Squad, written and directed by David Ayer. Guy did Fury, End of Watch. Also, I believe Training Day. So we've got him directing, him in the director's chair. Apparently wrote this flick in 6 weeks. Huge cuts in between as a reaction to the backlash against Batman v Superman being too dark and gritty. And since, despite the bad reviews, has gone on to make a huge killing at the box office due to wide-scale fan support, independently of the fact that people still are trying to call this a financial failure. I don't know why. Also starring, obviously, the Will Smith coming at it Big Willie style once again. Enigmatic, charismatic, brilliant in this movie. Jared Leto as the Joker. We'll go into him. I'm not going to tell you my opinions on him yet. Viola Davis as Amanda Waller. I'm going to leave that as well. Model Cara Delevingne bringing to life the Enchantress. Jay Hernandez, Aidan Devine, Jai Courtney, who I'll go into. It's another guy. I'm not going to name the whole cast, and of course, Margot Robbie, who plays Harley Quinn. I don't love everything DC does. I think Marvel are getting a bit generic. Love Winter Soldier, love Daredevil, the TV series. So if Marvel does something good, I'm willing to say they've done something good. If DC does something bad, I'm willing to say DC did something bad. Here we go. So, number one criticism of the film, muddled editing. The one thing I ask, whenever someone comes at me with the muddled editing and how the editing of the film was bad and how, I'll go into the music and the soundtrack, because this at the beginning of the film essentially was like these kind of introductions, and they were using a lot of film school language, how about show don't tell, and about the kind of 3-story arc of a hero's journey, where there's a kind of beginning, inciting incident, then you have the kind of middle where a person is kind of finding their friends and allies and etc., climax, all of this kind of thing. And they talk about that, and they talk about how this movie is missing parts. Now, a very famous, I think it's probably the most popular book on screenwriting, and I really like this book, because what it says about screenwriting and film in general is there are no rules to film. If a film is good and enjoyable, right, and the editing isn't what you're used to, it's still an enjoyable film. It doesn't have to be paced the way other films are paced. In fact, there are no two films that are edited the same. So what's good editing versus bad editing? Did it serve and tell you a complete story that you enjoyed? Is my question in Suicide Squad. If the answer is no, fine. So let me talk about this guy's performance. Now, this is where I do agree with, you know, I still think the movie was bloody enjoyable. I really do. I really, really enjoyed the movie. The Joker was not my favorite character in the movie. Okay. Should the Joker be one of your favorite characters in the movie if the Joker's in a movie? Yeah. Was I disappointed a bit that I didn't enjoy this Joker as much, or it didn't live up to what I expected? Yeah. Can I take away my kind of fanboyish thing and say, hey, wait a second, isn't it a bit entitled that I feel like if the Joker wasn't good in this movie and there wasn't, I mean, I remember there was a story online that surfaced a few days after that said that one of the fans wanted to sue, they wanted to sue Warner Brothers because there wasn't enough Joker in the movie. And so they wanted to sue Warner Brothers over this. And isn't that a little bit entitled? I mean, it's a movie. They're making a movie, and they said it was false advertising. It's not called The Joker, so how was it false advertising? If it was called The Joker and the Joker isn't in it, then maybe you've got a point to sue Warner Brothers, or you know. But it was never promised. It was never stated. You know, if Warner Brothers had have come out with a statement saying the Joker is going to be in this movie for at least 30 or 40 minutes, and he wasn't, then maybe again you might have a case. It's ludicrous, whatever way you want to look at it, that you could care that much. But there's not enough Joker in the movie. Now, having said all of that stuff about my disappointment with the Joker, the disappointment with the Joker didn't come from the performance, came from how it was put together. Clearly, there were bits missing, you know, from the script. Now, there's two things you could say towards this. Missing from the editing. Now, you might say, oh, well, now you're contradicting yourself, Nerdman. You just said, like, the editing was fine, but now you're saying the editing ruined the Joker's performance. Well, the editing may have ruined the Joker's performance, but it didn't ruin the movie, so let's get that out of the way. But also, now, when it comes to the editing of this movie, we have to remember one thing. This movie is a direct response to what you were saying, what all these fanboys and critics and all these people were like shouting at the top of their lungs about Batman v Superman. They were saying it was too dark, it's too gritty, there's not enough humor. Where's the humor? Where's the kind of light-sided thing? So they did reshoots to make fans and people happy. And I think the humor in this movie worked a lot better and was a lot funnier than a lot of Marvel movies. I think it wasn't forced, it wasn't kind of third wall kind of breaking, where it's like it all kind of emanated naturally from the characters rather than you know, kind of trying to mock themselves and, you know, like, oh, you know, well, who's you know, when Ant-Man kind of ends up saying, well, you know, you wouldn't know who I am, you know, kind of thing. And it's like, because he's making reference to the fact he's Ant-Man. And this is what I don't like actually about the Justice League trailer, because actually they're starting to go into this kind of third wall breaking with, you know, Bruce Wayne kind of smiling at Aquaman, saying, you know, in this kind of glib, dumb way, like, ooh, I hear you talk to fish. You know, like it's like, come on, man. You know, anyway, so because of the response to Batman v Superman and how much people were saying, oh, it's dark, it's scary, oh, God, what about the children? What did DC and Warner Brothers do? They cut together a version which isn't so dark, which isn't so gritty, and obviously we know when the Joker gets dark, when the Joker gets, you know, psychotic. Unfortunately, the Joker is a pretty dark, scary character. I remember when I went to go and see The Dark Knight, and apparently, what Jared Leto does in this movie is even worse than The Dark Knight. Like, I've heard some of the deleted scenes, and what he's doing is, like, you know, hitting Harley Quinn and, you know, all of this kind of stuff. They have an abusive relationship and all of this kind of thing. I went to The Dark Knight and I saw this dad bring in his kid, and the Joker started screaming at the screen, you know, and then you know, it went dark, and there was a bit where Batman's looking at the Joker and he's in you know, that kind of sonar vision, and it was just like, even I was a bit frightened of it. It was like out of a fucking horror movie. And this kid was just crying. The kid was like 11 years old. He was just crying. The dad just was like laughing and kind of was like, oh man, oh, come on, you know, and had him leave. So they took the scary bits of the Joker out, you know, and people were reacting to that. And what do? We start complaining about them taking the bits of the Joker out. We start complaining about them taking the dark and gritty bits out and making it more fun and upbeat, which is what it basically was, while keeping some sense of the kind of darkness that's appropriate to the Suicide Squad. So, as far as I'm concerned, you know, if you want to blame anyone for the Joker's performance being removed, blame the bloody critics. You criticised Batman v Superman. Blame Warner Brothers a little bit for caving in and listening to those critics instead of sticking by the original vision of the director. I'm going to try and get through the rest of the points a little bit more quickly. Now, my next point is this: the Enchantress is a terrible villain. Well, I've got 2 points to this. I'm gonna get through this really quickly. Now, I'm gonna say something very. There's gonna be 3 points to this. First of all, I wanna say to Cara Delevingne, I apologize for how cruel people are being to you, because it's absolutely taken way out of proportion to what that performance was. What was she? She was a basic witch. She was visually, let's just take the performance out of it. Visually, the Enchantress was very interesting, spectacular. Everyone talks about the hand scene. Everyone loves that hand scene when it kind of comes through. Really cool, visually spectacular scene, and generally just a visually spectacular popping out of the screen villain. Was her plot basic and, you know, not very kind of generic by the end? Yeah, sure it was. But, like, in the end, Cara Delevingne played 3 separate characters in this movie, and each one of them were distinct to me. I didn't see Cara Delevingne, I saw the Enchantress. Now, whether you like the Enchantress or not, you know, that's your own issue. But when I see Cara Delevingne as a person, you know, I see no relationship to what I saw on screen. And to me, that's good acting. When she was June Moon, she was distinct and different. When she was the scary, weird witch, version of Enchantress, she was very different and menacing. as far as I'm concerned. She was creepy, really, really creepy. And finally, when she was the kind of over the kind of how would you put it, empress kind of version of Enchantress as well. She was, really, really fantastic. She was not really fantastic, but she was disappeared and was completely different to those two other characters that she was playing in the movie. I thought she did a fantastic job. And this is another one of those things where like everyone says, "Oh well, Enchantress was bad, Enchantress was bad, Enchantress was bad," and then I start asking them about it. So I'm like, so do you think, like, when you see Cara Delevingne, have you ever seen an interview with her? Oh, let me show you an interview. I showed them a little interview, and I'm like, does that seem to you like how she was on screen? So how's she a bad actress? Because that's a different. She's just taken and embraced this role completely and done something, that's completely. She is Enchantress. You might not like the character. You might think that character's just a generic villain, but as far as her performance is concerned, I don't see how she could have done it any better. Now, there's this whole controversy of the popping and locking, okay? And I'm like, apparently she's doing some weird movements and it's so distracting from the movie, and that's what the main kind of contention of her performance is. What? What? What movie are you watching? I never saw anything that she did that was so offensive to my senses that I would think that, the movie somehow suffered from it. There was nothing distracting about what she was doing. I don't even know what this is. This is just pure hate. Like, this is a new girl, maybe she's a model. People think, oh, she's a model, she can't act. Let me tell you something about actresses. They are some of the most beautiful people physically on earth. Okay? Now, I'm not saying this is like I celebrate beauty of, and I think actresses are all fucking fantastic or anything like that. I don't give a fuck about beautiful, whether a woman's beautiful or not. It doesn't bother me. I don't treat them any differently. I don't think they're special. It's nothing to do with that. But actresses generally are some of the most beautiful people on earth. So it's only logically speaking that some of them are going to have been models. Okay? So the fact that she's a model has nothing to do with whether she's a good actress or not. She could be a bad actress and have been a model. She could be a good actress and have been a model. You can have an actress who was never a model who's a bad actress. It's completely ridiculous. And also, the reason people hate the Enchantress, this is the real reason. I'm going to tell you the absolute real reason people hate the Enchantress. It's because they're entitled pricks, right? Who, some of them, not all of you, some of you genuinely don't like her, I'll give you that, but some of them are entitled pricks who are like, oh, the villain wasn't the Joker. We didn't get enough Joker. Even though we didn't like the performance of the Joker, so why do we want more of him? But we didn't get enough Joker, so we're just going to hate on the villain. It could have been any villain. The fact it wasn't the Joker, that's what they hated about it. That is exactly what they hated about it. They were disappointed. They were hyped up to see another performance of the Joker that could match up to Heath Ledger's, and they didn't see that, so they just were like, fuck this villain, she's terrible. Look at her dancing. Wow, what's she doing with her belly? Fuck off. All right, so, and also, the last point on this, as far as I'm concerned, let's talk about this, because actually, Suicide Squad, in my honest opinion, has the best villain in a comic book movie. Yeah, yeah. You're gonna look at me like, what is this guy about to say? You're sharpening your knives right now. This movie has the best comic book villain in a movie, in a comic book movie since The Dark Knight. Boom. Drop the mic. What am I talking about? Surely you can't be talking about the Enchantress. Okay, you know, nerd man, you like the Enchantress. You like the Enchantress a lot, but come on, man, you're not really telling me you think she's the best villain. No. The true villain of this movie was Amanda Waller. I'm gonna get into her a bit more later. Amanda Waller was a revelation, a bad ass, a complete maniac, scary, terrifying villain. Every moment she was on screen, her presence was exciting, thrilling. I didn't know what she was going to do. Many people I speak to about this movie, they hate her. They're like, oh, couldn't stand her. And I'm like, but you thought she was good. Oh yeah, she was really, really good, really menacing. It's like, she was just so fucking evil. I just couldn't even stand her, like, when she came on screen. That's how good she was. She was one of those villains you don't even like. I liked her because I just thought she was a badass. But anyway, she is the true villain of the piece. Much better villain than Enchantress. Much better villain than the Joker in this movie. Just a fantastic villain. So if you're talking about Suicide Squad lacking a villain, I'm sorry, not good enough. Really had one of the best villains, not in cinematic history, but definitely in comic book history. She blows. And by the way, Enchantress and Amanda Waller, I will put up against any Marvel villain to date, and that is not a compliment to Amanda Waller and Enchantress. That is a critique of the trash that we have come to see as Marvel villains. Absolutely atrocious. You have no right as a critic to talk about any DC villain, whether it's Lex Luthor from the Superman. Sorry, Lex Luthor from Batman v Superman. You know what? Hell, I hate Man of Steel. Hate Man of Steel. Even Zod is more memorable. I hated Zod. Is more memorable than pretty much any Marvel villain to date. So please, get off your high horse if you're like saying you love Marvel and then you're dissing the villain of the DC movie Enchantress. That is nuts. She's much more. I remember her more than any Marvel villain. Here's one I love. God. And what you're going to notice as well, I want to just take an aside just very, very quickly. I'm going to try and rush through these because quickly as well, and I'm sorry I've taken so long. What you're going to notice is none of these are real critics. Like, they're not like objective critical criteria for the movie. They're so internal. When you have a movie and you're trying to criticize it, I think there's a general rule. Of course, you have to bring your own personal taste into how you feel about the movie before you criticize it. Okay? You do have to. You have to be like, okay, I just don't. Now, I personally, I don't like westerns. I don't like cowboy movies, generally. I mean, there's a few I like the one of the Tarantino ones. I like some of the old, the Clint Eastwood ones. One or two of them, but generally, as a rule, I don't like westerns. Right? But I'm not going to take that bias of me not liking westerns and take it into a movie. If I feel that people who like westerns will like that movie, I'll say it's a good movie. It's the same with Suicide Squad. You have to have a criteria where you judge it a little bit objectively, where you say, well, okay, maybe I don't like how this movie is. Maybe it's a bit too generic. I'm a highbrow critic, and I'm used to watching, I don't know, Citizen Kane and all of this kind of nonsense. And all these highbrow movies and art movies and all of this. But if you're going to go into a comic book movie, you have to say, well, would people who like this genre like this movie? And if the answer is yes, then you have to be a bit fair in how you're judging it, because these are just some of these critics and what they're saying about the movie. It seems like they don't like the comic book genre, as opposed to they don't like this movie, or they, like this movie personally. It's like they're criticizing things that are staples of the genre. So anyway, here's another one. This is more of a fanboy one. This isn't something that the critics have said. This is amazing. I love this one. The villain is too powerful. Enchantress is too powerful. She's too OP, man. Too OP, bro. Why? Like, these guys aren't even metahumans. And she's too OP. How do they even take her down? All right. Well, all right. So you can see I've been fair. Like, the Joker, the editing fucked up the Joker, messed up the Joker a little bit. So you can see I've been fair. All right. So the movie is called Suicide Squad. These people, the whole concept of the movie is these are bad guys who are going on a mission that they're likely not going to be able to survive from. It's so dangerous that it is suicide to go into the mission. How can you possibly say, as a criticism of a movie called Suicide Squad, that the villain is too OP? She's too powerful for the Suicide Squad because they're not. And then they say, well, and the whole thing of the movie is like, oh, the whole premise is like, what if Superman were to, take down the White House or something like that? Who would stop him? And Amanda Waller says, this Suicide Squad will stop him. And everyone's like, well, how are this Suicide Squad? Deadshot can't stop him. Well, Deadshot could probably stop him with a kryptonite bullet because he's quite good. He's quite handy with those old guns, isn't he? But Harley Quinn, she's just crazy. Diablo, well, you found out what he could do later, but could that take Superman down? I'm not sure. Maybe could give him a little bit of an interesting fight. You never know. But generally speaking, yeah, El Diablo on his bad day, on a normal day shouldn't be a problem for Superman. And you can run down the line, Killer Croc, etc., etc., etc. However, the fact is, all Amanda Waller said is like she's looking for these metahumans. And the second thing is, if you take the Enchantress into account, then actually you do have someone who could take on Superman. You saw what she could do. She could do amazing things, amazing feats. We know Superman, his weakness is magic. So essentially, the Suicide Squad could be a problem for Superman. What if Enchantress got into his head and made him see all these weird fantasies? There you go. So again, her plan was completely valid. It's not her fault. In the end, Enchantress kind of, turned on her because she couldn't control her through her heart. Although I will give the critics one thing on this, and I haven't heard many of them mention this, but I thought this was absolutely stupid. And I thought the writing could have been a lot better here. Amanda Waller was a complete badass, as I said. But why? Why did she have the Enchantress's heart right next to her, and her thing was to hurt it with a pencil? I thought that was a bit silly. It didn't take me out of the movie. I still thought the movie was fun. It was a minor gripe. It was, and I'm going to go into something of the style of the movie and why some of these kind of silly, dumb things actually made a little bit of sense. But like that was pretty dumb. You know, you would have thought she had the heart in some kind of connected to some bomb somewhere that if you know the enchantress goes near it, or she's got a magic you know, something like that, where you know she'd be pretty, it would be pretty hard for the enchantress to get at the heart, but for it to be right in front of her, that kind of defied belief. Although you could see it as maybe like a magic lantern or something. Maybe if they explain that a little bit, like the heart is like a magic lantern, like generally if you have possession of it, you have control of the enchantress, right? So it could have worked like that. But anyway, that was a bit of a stupid part of the movie. Same with her, you know, she's standing in front of a guy who's, you know, supposed to be really, really quick with guns and shoot people, and she's got the phone in front of her hand, which she can use to blow off people's heads. Seemed a bit far-fetched. I think Deadshot would be able to get her before she'd be able to get the phone. So there should have been some explanation of that. Generally, these are nitpicks. It's a comic book. Just try, like, enjoy. Okay, if you can enjoy. If that really is so frustrating for you, the 2 points I just mentioned, which I can kind of understand, then I understand. But in general, just try and enjoy. Stop being a film critic. Stop trying to be a film critic. You just sit down and enjoy a movie, unless it's so bad, like Independence Day Resurgence, that it's impossible to enjoy. Anyway, so. And even then, if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. But like, that's my general thing. So the villain is too powerful. I think I've said why that's insane. Okay. The soundtrack wasn't good. Why? I'm not even gonna. You know, dignify that with an answer. I mean, the soundtrack wasn't good. It was distracting. The voice mixing. Again, what is this? Who starts talking about voice mixing? When I was growing up, no one talked about voice mixing unless you're in the industry, unless you're in the voice, like literally the voice mixing, you know, the sound engineering industry. Now everyone's talking about it. You see people on YouTube. Everyone's talking about the sound engineering. The you know, what is that? Could you hear the people's voices over the music? And they say, oh, it was all the way through just music popping up random. No, it wasn't. The music was completely appropriate for each of the characters involved. When it was Harley Quinn, it was appropriate for Harley Quinn, the music that came on. When it was, you know, Deadshot, it was appropriate for him, the music that came on. When it was Amanda Waller, it was perfect for her, and so on. So there you go. I'm not even going to dignify that with an answer, the soundtrack. And by the way, the soundtrack was pretty epic by the end. By the end of the movie, when it was coming to the third act, the climax, you know, pretty much after those introductions in the beginning, those little vignettes introducing each of the characters, the soundtrack after that was basically, you know, your classic movie soundtrack. So I have no idea what people are talking about with that. Misogynistic depiction of Harley, the misogynistic depiction of Harley Quinn. Next subject, the misogynistic. Here's one where I kind of agree with the critics on this. This is something I felt was distracting in the movie. It wasn't so distracting that I wasn't able to see the fun in the movie, but I didn't like it. And I also thought it was disrespectful to Margot Robbie's performance as Harley Quinn. The over sexualized. I mean, those shorts were just, you know, and Margot Robbie looks pretty attractive in any, like, you know, I don't know what she could have worn that would be different, but it was so much. I mean, did I enjoy looking at it? Actually, not really. I didn't even enjoy. It was that disrespectful to the performance that I in some ways didn't enjoy looking at. So the misogynistic depiction of Harley Quinn as a critique of the movie, a general critique of how the character was handled, I feel is fair because I thought Margot Robbie, which I'll talk about later when I talk about the 5 things I really liked about the movie. I think Margot Robbie did such a nuanced performance, and she was one of my favorite things in the whole movie. I think she knocked it out of the park. I think most people agree she knocked it out of the park. And the sexualization of her, I thought was distasteful in some ways. I didn't mind her being sexualized to the extent of, say how Nolan or, say how Tim Burton kind of sexualized Catwoman. But it was sexualized in a way where she was using her sexuality, anything where it was, where she was kind of sexualized, it was always her using her sexuality as a kind of weapon. It was her taking her female sexuality, which is a part of women, and using it as a power. So to overcome either victimhood or to just use as a kind of power in general against a variety of different kind of opponents in a kind of manipulative or strategic kind of manner. So with Harley Quinn, I didn't feel that was the case. I felt sometimes they just kind of lingered over her body for no apparent reason. And it was very kind of male gaze. One might argue, okay, well, it was a homage to the comics, but I think the comics do that too much as well. The kind of, lack of variety of kind of different body types and different things in the movie. So, misogynistic depiction of Harley Quinn, I kind of agree with the critics. But here's what I am going to say in defense of the movie and how it treated female characters. This movie, and this is one of the things I'm not gonna go into too much about this because I'm gonna talk about this later. This movie has a very, very diverse use of women. So in some ways, you can justify Harley Quinn's hypersexualization in this movie because there are other women, that show that not, the other women aren't, well, they're not sexual, sexually kind of depicted. So it's like Harley Quinn's sexuality is part of her character, so she can be so you can be a sexual woman, but it shows that not all women are just or are sexual in that way, or sexually provocative in that way. Some women are like Amanda Waller. He wasn't sexualized at all, and was very, very kind of, and then it had another woman in June Moon who kind of played 3, where Enchantress you could say was a bit like sexualized herself, but June Moon wasn't very sexualized, I don't think. So you had another kind of main character. So there was 3 very diverse, strong, central characters in the movie who were females, and I tell me a Marvel movie where that's happened, or a comic movie. I can't think of one. And that's, you're not even counting Katana, who is an Asian, female. So we'll get into that later. So the misogynistic depiction of Harley Quinn, I think, is a fair argument. Too many characters. Again, this one is something that is said. The characters weren't developed enough, etc., etc. What did you want? They keep saying like Marvel, they're trying to catch up with Marvel, they're doing everything too fast. So this is the too many characters. I'll put up the titles in the video so you can see the too many characters argument. Now, what do you want them to do? I mean, you say that they're trying to play catch up. This is what you always hear, that the Marvel comics earned it. They did individual movies so you could understand. So what did you want? I mean, you wanted the Suicide Squad. You wanted them to have individual movies. before doing the Suicide Squad movie by yourself? I don't understand what you wanted. Do you not think that in later movies they might be able to explore characters like Katana, like the secondary characters that you thought were interesting? And you might do the show don't tell her kind of argument. Oh, they just said that her sword ate the souls of people. You didn't get to see it. It's a couple of seconds of the movie, first of all. Okay. Yeah, it's probably not the best way to kind of introduce a character's abilities or skills. Someone just say it kind of on the nose like that. But I mean, that was part of the kind of B movie quality homage of the movie that it had anyway. But let me put it this way. There's plenty of time in sequels to explore characters like Katana. In a movie, generally, we don't expect, an ensemble cast that there not be two characters or even one character that is the one that they follow and the only one you get any background on, the only one that you really that really matter. Look at something like The Predator. The Predator actually is structured quite a lot like Suicide Squad in a lot of ways. It's an ensemble cast. These guys going into some kind of suicide mission, and then meeting a kind of OP character who's fairly one-dimensional. Just kind of like a very visually interesting villain, but he's essentially one-dimensional and driven by one thing. He essentially just wants to kill these guys because he's a hunter. But he hunts intelligent life and he's an alien. The only character that you get any character development from in that movie is Arnold Schwarzenegger's character. You don't need to know the rest. All the rest of the characters have to do is be cool. And that's what Suicide Squad does. Too many characters. No, not really. I mean, there was a bunch of fun characters. You've got El Diablo, who had a good story arc, by the way. You had Captain Boomerang, who's like very good, and what's it, Baron. Baron Holtz, something. Ike Baron Holtz as Grits. He was the security guy at Bel Rev prison. He was very fun guy to watch. So really good comic relief with Captain Boomerang and that Grits guy. I laughed every moment the two of them were on screen. I thought they were brilliant. Jai Courtney as well. You had the heart of the story, El Diablo. And then you had the two main characters, who were the ones that were the important ones, which they were developed really well, and they had a complete arc. I remember like Dan, and it was maddening. It was completely maddening. They did a show on Screen Junkies where they were, the movie fights. I don't know if you guys watch it. I watch it sometimes. And they did one on Suicide Squad. And, Dan is one of the fighters who's like supposedly a champion. I'd love to go on the show and take him on. He'd probably win, I don't know. But he said, the Joker wasn't important to the movie. And if you take the Joker out of the movie, it would be the same thing. It would be the same movie. And, you just didn't need him in there because you could tell Harley Quinn was crazy and etc., etc., etc. And to me, that was the equivalent of saying Deadshot's daughter wasn't needed in the movie. There's too many characters. Why didn't they take Deadshot's daughter out of the movie? It would have been the same movie. Because the Joker was there to inform Harley Quinn's character. So you could see the background of how she became Harley Quinn. Okay, that was what he was there. That's what he served to do in the movie. With Deadshot, it was his daughter that served to do that in the movie. So I don't hear anyone saying Deadshot's daughter shouldn't have been in the movie. But because it's the Joker, it's like, oh, well, like, if he isn't going to do something like, like be the best thing in the whole film, then he shouldn't be in the film. There are plenty of cool DC characters. Okay, the Joker doesn't always have to be the highlight of every single movie he's in. That's what DC has done, and this is where DC's to blame, because DC should have introduced so many of these characters in better ways a long time ago, so that people would be excited when they hear, oh, Amanda Waller's in a new movie, and because I can't wait to see who they're going to get to cast as Amanda Waller, or because she's a great character in the comics. So people could have been as excited to see her, or to see a number of these different characters. All right, maybe not like Deadshot and all of these kind of guys, but like in the end, what I'm saying is, Joker doesn't always have to be the highlight of every movie he's in. It doesn't mean the movie's bad because Joker wasn't the best thing in it. Okay? He just happened to not be the best thing in this movie. Harley Quinn was better than him. Deadshot was better than him, and so was Amanda Waller. That's just the way it is. It just wasn't the best thing in the movie. Doesn't make it a bad movie. So again, there's no story arcs for the characters. Well, again, I think I've just gone into that with. Oh, sorry. This is a critique. The film has no plot. Okay, I has no plot. So the film has no plot. That's an argument here. I don't even know what to say to this. What do you say to somebody who tells you a film that clearly has a plot has no plot? Now, is the plot thin? Sure. These guys who are villains, who were in prison, going on a suicide mission. There's a couple of twists and turns along the way, supplied by some of the characters. But effectively, this is a character-driven movie. There are character-driven movies and there are plot-driven movies. A good example of a nice plot-driven movie is something like Cillian with Elysium or something with Matt Damon. There are plenty of movies where it's kind of just plot-driven, where the characters are not as significant. You've just got a character that's plot, or say The Pianist. That's another plot-driven movie. It's not a character-driven movie. It's this guy who's lost in this terrifying situation, and you just have to follow him about in the environment that he's in. Then there are movies that are more character-driven. It's more about having a fun character. And this is why I compare this movie. I say this to me, Suicide Squad is like a modern-day, lesser Big Trouble in Little China. Because what Big Trouble in Little China is a movie with a kind of thin, hokey, crazy plot, which back in the day, when it first came out, critics kind of panned. They disliked the movie a lot, Big Trouble in Little China. But the movie, and they were like, oh, the plot's thin and the villain's this, and the other characters aren't very developed. But the movie wasn't about that. The movie was about, Jack. I can't even remember his surname. He's one of my favorite characters in movie history. I should remember his surname. It's really bad. But the movie was about him and just following him doing his crazy stuff, going through some crazy plot in Chinatown. It hardly made any sense, and demons and ghosts were coming out of the woodworks where, it was just about him and his reactions to all the crazy stuff, because he was such a fun character that it didn't matter. He was almost plot-proof as a character, because he was so fun with his lines and the way he was responding to the situations which were so outlandish. He was the guy who was saying what we were thinking as an audience as you were going through the movie, and we loved him for it. So that is essentially what Suicide Squad is. It's a bunch of fun characters who are going on an adventure, and because they're so fun, it hardly matters what that adventure is because you just want to be one of the squad. You just want to be with them on this adventure. So when the third act doesn't live up to the standards that you expect of an epic third act or something like that, you have to remember it wasn't about like the plot. It was just about those characters and where they were going and the fact that you cared if they were able to succeed and if they were able to finally defeat the monster at the end of the movie, and each one of them could resolve the arcs that they had at the beginning of the movie, and that leads me on to the next point, which is the people are like there were no story arcs for the characters, and at first I started thinking when I first heard this I was like, is that true? Because I was like, yeah, maybe I was so lost in how fun these characters were that I didn't realise that they didn't really have these story arcs. And I thought maybe they're right. And then I started thinking, wait a second, what about El Diablo? That guy had a really cool, like I genuinely cared about. Like he started off where he didn't want to fight. You find out, he finally kind of is, by the Deadshot character, kind of leader character, is made to kind of use his powers, his abilities finally, and see that they can be used for good, even though he thinks they're just a curse and can only be used for destruction. And he finally sees that he can use it to save his family and his friends. And then you finally find out why he didn't want to use his powers. And then even further than that, you find out, that because there's a really good bit where Harley Quinn says, embrace that, embrace what you did. Don't be a chicken, when a chicken shit or whatever, and a coward and not and sit there feeling sorry for yourself. And what happens when he is able to embrace that? He's able to see past the witch's dream that she plants in his head, and then he's also able to fully embrace his power by embracing that he did do this, and there is no way back. He can't live in some dream world that she creates where his family still exists. He has to embrace the fact that he has done this terrible, terrible thing, and only by embracing that can he fully embrace his power and use it finally for good. So El Diablo, great character, great story arc. I mean, I didn't really like him so much as a character, but I loved his story arc, and I liked the heart, and he was played well, he was played good. I think a lot of other characters had some better lines, maybe, but he was a good character, a nice little part of the Suicide Squad. Harley Quinn definitely had a story arc. I mean, I'm not going to go into it too much, but she had there was a beginning, a middle, and an end where she kind of it's almost like, but Harley Quinn and Deadshot had very, very similar. It was them having to overcome the fatal flaw that made them these kind of tragic, like not tragic heroes, but yeah, well, in a way, tragic heroes. They were tragic heroes, not on the kind of in the Shakespearean sense, but they both shared the fatal flaw that you often find with a tragic hero, that they had to that was either going to kind of destroy them, or that was either going to be something that they had to overcome, or something that they had to confront to be able to finally take on and destroy the monster at the end. Essentially, that's what it was. I mean, if Harley Quinn couldn't, get over her what had driven her crazy, what had made her into this insane person, and if she couldn't confront that, then she wouldn't have been able to defeat this woman, because she was willing to say, oh, hey, you know, Joker's just died, but this woman's saying she can almost give her back to the Joker. And she had to overcome finally that complete obsession that had driven her mad of her love for the Joker, to be able to defeat the monster and kill her with the sword. Deadshot, very similar with the daughter. If he didn't have all that build up with the daughter, that bit where, it was the first time, he wasn't willing to shoot Batman, because if he shot Batman, then he could have, in front of his daughter, she would have seen who he was, and he didn't want her to see that side of himself. But now she's standing in front of him, and he has to kill the Enchantress, who's a real bad guy, who's going to destroy the world if he doesn't do this. And finally, he overcomes that, internal emotional that emotional anchor he has in the beginning, to be able to destroy the monster. Again, how do these characters not have story arcs? Some of them don't, because they're not needed. They're just there as secondary, really, really secondary characters, Like, what story arc do the characters in Predator have, apart from... I don't even think Arnold Schwarzenegger himself has a story arc in that movie. The main character, he goes to a jungle. I don't know if there's any specific emotional kind of thing that he's connected to in his past. I think it's just a bunch of badasses who go to a jungle and confront some kind of monstrous creature which they have to overcome and kill. I don't think any of them have a story arc. They're just badass and cool, and we like watching them, and we like to, and because we care about them because they're so cool, it makes us care about how each of them are getting killed off by this alien. That's it. So again, what this proves is, even the notion that a movie's character needs a story arc for it to be really, really good, like each character needs their own arc, that's false. It's patently false. Now, would I say the most movies, is it sensible to at least try, if you're a movie maker, to have your character have some kind of story arc like that? Because the most likelihood is, if they don't, the film isn't going to be that good. I would absolutely agree with that. Absolutely agree. However, having said all of that, it is still not a rule. It is just something that is highly recommended in storytelling. It's not a rule, just highly, highly, highly recommended that you add that kind of story arc. Because there are no rules to storytelling. There are no really, really strict, apart from you have to, there just isn't that kind of rule to film storytelling. It doesn't have that. So the story arc thing, obviously, when I say story arc, you have to understand what I mean by story arc. It's like a character arc. Obviously, there has to be a story arc. There has to be a beginning, a middle, and an end of the story, right? And even that's not necessarily true, but like generally speaking, there has to be a beginning, middle, and the end of a story, and the characters' actions have to be the things that, are the things that move on that story from the beginning to the middle to the end. However, the character arcs, which I'm sorry, this is what I was talking about, character arcs. I'll put a thing on top so that you know what I'm talking about during this section. When I say story arc, I actually meant character arc. So the character arcs, highly, highly sensible that you try and give your characters character arcs because it makes people invested in the character. However, do you have to have a character arc for a film to be successful and enjoyable for all of the characters? No. And thirdly, and most importantly, all the main characters in this movie do have character arcs. So either way you look at it, there's the June Moon one as well. I'm not going to go into that one, but there's the June Moon and the kind of Captain America soldier guy who is dating her. There's his story arc as well with her. So all of them have a story arc. His story arc's actually quite good because he's like he disrespects Deadshot. You know, and he's like convinced. He almost dehumanizes like them these kind of prisoners as just kind of scum, and he thinks he's completely noble and different and a good guy. And over the course of the movie, he realizes actually this kind of law enforcement and what we do on the legal side of things isn't so far from what from these bad guys. And in fact, Amanda Waller is probably more insane than any of the guys on the team in terms of villainy. And you know, you see that moment in the end of the movie where he gives Deadshot a little bit more time with his daughter because he's finally learned to respect these kind of criminals as not just criminals, they're just human beings like him, or they're just people like him. So we're almost at the home run now. So there's 10 things, and we're on number 10. Oh, so characters didn't get enough time to develop. Again, I think I've covered this essentially, like with the no character arcs part of this video. So no character arcs. Effectively, sorry, the characters didn't get enough time to develop. I say poppycock. I thought every character, like the one they love to throw at us, people who actually enjoy Suicide Squad. This is the one they love to throw at us. They love to throw Slipknot. Who gives a crap about Slipknot and his death? No one cares. I didn't care. I wanted him to die. I didn't want to know anything about him. I wanted him to die as quickly as possible. I thought it was funny. I even liked the Killer app line. It was a bit, you know, I didn't see, it wasn't obvious actually, but you know, the Killer app line that Harley Quinn uses after he get. I found it was funny that Slipknot died like that. I kind of laughed a bit. I've got a sick sense of humor. I'm a sick man. There's something wrong with me. I just like the fact that Slipknot died in that way. It was kind of sexual. But no, I'm joking. Slipknot dies, and it's fine. He was one of my favorite characters for it. So I didn't need him to be developed for me, the guy who's going to die, to prove to the Suicide Squad that the neck bombs were real. And I'm going to put spoiler alert at the beginning of this movie, because that's a huge spoiler that I just gave you. But I'm going to put spoiler alert. I assume all of you have watched the film, so I'm going to put spoiler alert in the description if you haven't watched the film. And the last thing I'm going to put, this is again more of a fanboy criticism than it is what the critics said. They said the Joker and Harley Quinn's relationship was not accurate to the comics. And also, sorry, this is just an aside, this is just 10B. Joker and Harley Quinn's relationship wasn't accurate to the comics, and the villains weren't bad enough in this movie because we were sold apparently on the fact that the Suicide Squad was a bunch of villains and the villains weren't bad enough. People didn't believe these guys were really villainous. Wow. Okay, so Joker and Harley Quinn's relationship wasn't accurate. I think I kind of covered that in the fact that if they did make it comic accurate, whereas to try and translate what was in the animated show, but try and translate it for kind of PG-13 audience, film audience to make sense to them, it would have been disturbing because essentially the Joker and Harley Quinn's relationship was one of a domestic abuse relationship. I don't think I don't think film audiences are necessarily ready to see the Joker in that light because people like the Joker. He's one of those villains that people like. So having him, just blatant, like even when I see it in the, in the computer games or in the comics, I'm kind of like, it kind of like it weirds me out a bit because I'm like, oh man, I like the Joker. I like that he's sick and twisted and does all these crazy things. But when he just beats up women, it's something I disrespect so much in my own personal kind of life that you're just like, that's kind of cold, dude. Like he just slapped her straight in the face like she was nothing, and she's just cowering away, like this little hurt little mouse. And it's just, I think that given the response, although I would have loved to see this covered in the movie, but given the response to Batman v Superman, we have no one to blame but ourselves that the Joker and Harley Quinn's relationship was not dealt with in that kind of manner because as I said, first of all, it would have been very uncomfortable to see. It would have added a dimension to the Joker that I think would be very, very interesting, and maybe it could be covered in later movies because it would be cool to kind of have a Joker that, even though you kind of still kind of find funny and you like in this kind of sick way, that there is something definite about him that you really do think, wow, there's nothing cool about this. This is just straight up villainous. Everything he did in The Dark Knight was kind of cool. He was this cool bank robber, anarchist. There was nothing he did that you didn't find kind of cool. Everyone he was manipulating kind of was an asshole. Everyone he was killing or tampering with were kind of assholes. So, when he kills the gangster, you're like, that's awesome. You know, Joker's one of those villains that you kind of like, even though Batman has to stop this guy. You kind of just you find it fun that what he's doing the whole way through. So it would be kind of interesting to have a Joker where there's a dimension of him where you're like, wow, I really don't like that bit of that bit of the Joker. Really makes me uncomfortable that he just like beats up women like that. But you couldn't do that because they couldn't go there. Because if they went there, the backlash, because people would have been, oh, it's too dark, and the violence towards women, and oh, Harley Quinn's already so sexualized. Now she's like a bad sexualized, hypersexualized sex object. It would have been crazy, the backlash, and people wouldn't have liked the Joker, and it would have been crazy because people are very passionate about the Joker. I'm not. I like to see interesting, crazy things done with characters, these established characters, and taking new angles on them, but I don't think it would have flown. I think it would have hurt the movie if he was just this violent against Harley Quinn. So yeah, those are me breaking down basically why I think Suicide Squad was all the criticisms against it are overzealous, bombastic. I want to take like just a little bit of time to just read a couple of the criticisms. So let me take this one. Writer-director David doesn't have the right graphic technique for a comic book style jamboree. He's strictly a noirish pulp guy, and the characters, all whom are promising, that's not so bad. Okay, so this one, Suicide Squad's an absolute waste of time. Well, I'm gonna maybe read this because let me see something, because I want to just give some kind of example. Oh, it's all in Spanish, great. Wow, this one's amazing. This one, you're gonna love this. This is from Rotten Tomatoes. This is the kind of critiques everyone. This review makes up 27%. I'm gonna tell you what it says just straight off the bat. An over caffeinated, underwhelming succession of skirmishes and squabbles with plot borrowed from X-Men Apocalypse and lessons not learned from Batman and Robin. Was the person drunk when they wrote that? Like, can anyone, even somebody who doesn't like the movie, can you tell me how that makes any sense? So Kiwi audiences could have cause for complaint under the Consumer Guarantees Act with this one. Many a comic book movie fanboy and girl would have been salivating at the prospect of what promised to be an anarchic, gleeful antidote to the sullen ballfest that was Dawn of Justice. Little thing to take a shot at Dawn of Justice. However, those slick and slinky trailers that so thrilled blah blah blah, overselling Jared Leto's presence and hiding its clearly ropey villains. The pre-publicity desperately wanted to believe it was finally DC's answer to Guardians of the Galaxies and the Avengers. Instead, we've been given 2 hours of what is all sizzle and no substance, with the best 15 minutes, the initial character introductions, all backed by classic cuts from parent company Warner's back catalogue. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say about this. So picking up the pieces of the aftermath of Justice, this is Viola Davis's Nick Fury as government official assembling the worst of the worst in preparation for next metahumans, who, unlike Superman, might not share our values. Naturally, she's already got one in mind, the Enchantress. What follows is an over-caffeinated, underwhelming succession of skirmishes and squabbles. I'm gonna actually put this up so that you can see this, because this is beautiful. This is exactly what I'm talking about, and this is where I'm saying, like, you know, the fact that these scores influence, you know, people's opinions and whether they go and see these movies is crazy. How can you say this as a critique? This is nothing that's been said in this critique of the film it doesn't have any meaning. None of it has any meaning. It's just associations with bad things. That's what he's done. So what follows is an over-caffeinated, underwhelming succession of skirmishes. Is that true? Where are all these skirmishes that you see? There's action scenes, yeah, sure, but not all of it is skirmishes and squabbles, with large chunks of plot borrowed from X-Men Apocalypse. This is an actual reviewer on Rotten Tomatoes. How could they possibly have borrowed from X-Men Apocalypse, another film that's underrated, by the way? How could they possibly have borrowed from X-Men Apocalypse? The films came out like X-Men Apocalypse came out like, was it a month before Suicide Squad? How could it have done that with chunks of plot borrowed from X-Men Apocalypse? I don't know if he means that they were similar. I don't know what he means. And a Baz Luhrmann-esque love story and lessons not learned from Batman and Robin. That's your critique. That so many of the people on Comic Book Movie that, you know, some DC fans are arguing with. Now, do I think it's overzealous for them to go off and start, you know, doing petitions and all of this kind of stuff? Yeah, I think it's a bit overzealous, but when you see something like that, when you see a critique like that on Rotten Tomatoes, it's disheartening that someone is allowed to be a professional critic and do such a terrible, terrible job. That doesn't even make any sense at all. So I'm gonna have that put up so that everyone can kind of see that wow, that film review. That I didn't even think it was going to be that bad. I really didn't. I thought they were going to say stuff like, "Oh, it's too dark. It's too." That blew my mind. I, so anyway, let me move on to the last bit of this video. I'll put some links in the bottom to some of the generic and poorly executed. You can't help feel sorry for the filmmakers. What is that? What does that mean? You know, whatever. I mean, I just think, are these people thinking about, take yourself out of the equation, your personal opinion, because so much of it these days, it's all about, oh, it's our personal opinion. Take yourself out of the equation and just think for a moment, will people who like this sort of movie enjoy the movie? And if the answer is yes, you have to give it a certain score. Then, as a critic, you can start talking about your own personal feelings towards it, and maybe the genre, or maybe just do a piece on the genre, and don't do a critique of the or reviews of the individual movies if you just don't like the genre. No lessons from Batman and Robin. Wow. So I'm just going to quickly go through this. So these are the 5 things that I would say are set this out. And not only make it a movie that, as I said, whether you think it's a great movie, a mediocre movie, or a bad movie, these are 5 reasons why I think the movie has, 1, value, and then secondly, above and beyond that, which is even more important, that it's like, you know, if you see a kid, right, like who's doing, because that's what reviewers are. They're essentially giving an exam score, right, to a kid, or to they're giving exam scores to the filmmakers. Okay, now if you get an essay and you think, wow, you know, this person's done it's not really good, the spelling's off, and some other things that bring it down on a technical level, the essay itself, right? But you can see there's a lot of creativity and imagination involved somewhere in that in the essay. So like there's some good ideas, but it has to be honed, and you have to get them to be able to you know, hone and put. You wouldn't just start going to the kid, this is terrible, this is horrible, you know, this is the worst book report I've ever seen. Just taking complete glee and delight in destroying the kid who's done this creative exam, even though the spelling's off and the grammar's a bit off and all of this kind of stuff. What you do is you do some constructive criticism. Well, you've got to work on your grammar here. Grammar's very off. Here's what you do. You know, here's how you use the articles. Here's how you know. And then you know, as far as the spelling, you know, you remember E before whatever it is. But you still have to say, hey, but this is the really, really good stuff about this. And I think so much is dismissing the good stuff. So many of these reviews don't even seem to be wanting to acknowledge that the Suicide Squad has some really, really interesting filmmaking in it. You know, like what it's attempted to do, even if you believe it isn't. It doesn't pull it off. It was noble in and of itself to try as a filmmaker to do. And I'm going to say the same thing of Batman v Superman. And this is where I would take the Marvel movies down, because I think Marvel movies are the ones that, you know, they have the perfect grammar, they have the perfect spelling, and the you know, the structure of the essay is very, very nice. But essentially everything that's being said in it is bland and regurgitated, and they heard it from somewhere else. You know, they have no ideas of their own, and you know, that's what I call your average Marvel movie. It's a C+. You know, all of them are C+. So now I'm going to say, for instance, the characters and acting, fantastic. That is something that you have to respect about this movie. Harley Quinn, fantastic. Deadshot, fantastic. The comedy relief I've talked about with Ike Barinholtz, fantastic as Grits, the guard at Belle Rev. So many funny moments, so many funny bits between him and Deadshot. When he says, like he's giving Harley Quinn her medicine, he's like taking photos saying spring break. Hilarious. Everyone was laughing when I was at the cinema when he did that. Captain Boomerang, another really funny. I mean, maybe you can say a bit of an Aussie stereotype, but whatever, man. I thought he was funny as hell. And every time he was doing something, I heard audiences laughing. And that's why I think, this film's got repeat viewing. The characters are just so fun. As I said, Amanda Waller, we'll get on to her. The heart of the movie, El Diablo. Great. Great cast, great acting. I hope I haven't missed anyone who was good. Now, here's one thing that I think is highly undervalued about this movie, and I don't even see many critics saying this. And you'd think they would. You'd think in this PC era that they would talk about this, that they would say this. This was one of the most multicultural, diverse casts with powerful women and characterizations of women, where the women were the women were the badasses. The women were the best characters. It was Harley Quinn, and I thought the Enchantress was very good, but some people, obviously, a lot of people don't. But you can't deny Harley Quinn, and you cannot deny Amanda Waller. I thought they were fantastic. And then the multicultural diversity of the cast, the Asian lead. When you see Asians in bloody Marvel movies, it's taken them their whole first. Black Widow hasn't had a movie, although I don't think she deserves one, because I don't think she's that interesting. But anyway, Marvel does films about uninteresting characters all the time, so why not give Black Widow one? It's not that I'm saying she doesn't deserve it over anyone else, but I think she's as interesting to me as Thor. I don't find Thor that interesting. I might want to see a Black Widow movie over a next Thor movie, for instance. So I think she deserved the movie over it. So when it's Marvel, it's taken them a whole phase one before they even started making movies with where are the powerful women? The women are so generic. I don't care what anyone says. I don't think Black Widow is that interesting. I don't think she was great in the event. Nothing she's ever done has made what they call character development essentially in Marvel for me is good one-liners. If she's got good one-liners, that was great character development, and the critics are like, oh, what great character development. She had good one-liners. Nah, it's not like that. So, in terms of the diversity of the cast, multicultural, again, how long did it take them to get Black Panther onto the Avengers team? How long did it get? They don't even have an Asian. What's her name? Scarlet Witch. Not really that interesting, is she? Let's face it. She's not like a powerful, badass woman that like other women will like. I'll give them that she's not being hypersexualized. Great, but that's about the only thing I can say in favor of how Marvel have treated their women. No one of color. Anyone who is ethnic is black. First of all, there's no other, maybe the cast was a little bit more diverse in Ant-Man, which I kind of liked, although forget about it. So the multicultural cast is very, very lacking in the Marvel movies. When you do have a kind of character who is one of the heroes in in one of the Marvel movies that is black, there's no other race, as I said, but that is black. What are they? I mean, it's always the same kind of thing. They're the sidekicks. They're the secondary characters of one of the main cast, and they're not really like a big part of the Avengers. Let's face it, you know. They're not, you know, they're just not, you know. So, you know, I won't go into the example. I can't even remember the names. Like there's Iron Man's sidekick played by Don Cheadle. Don Cheadle is too good for that role, way too good for that role. And then the other one, which is played by Anthony Mackie, again, great actor, could be doing so much more. They're wasting him as some weird hawk flying. Basically, he's flying Captain America. He's flying sassy black Captain America. That's basically what he is. Another series of one-liners. So there you go. And Black Panther, I'll go on to him later when I'm talking about this Captain America Civil War. As for the rest of it, let me shoot through this really quickly because I want to get over this particular video. So the next thing I would say that this movie does well, I don't know exactly what I'm going to title this. I guess just cinematography and soundtrack, maybe. This is a colourful, beautifully shot, young, vibrant, hip movie. As I said, with the multicultural cast, gives it that flavour of eclecticism and it's sexy and do you know what I mean? It's colourful and vibrant and young, you know. And I think eventually this movie is gonna go down as a cult classic. It really does remind me of, and I'm not saying it's as good as Big Trouble in Little China, but it does remind me of that fun, kind of energetic, lively vibe of Big Trouble in Little China. And I think when kids watch this at Christmas, you know, as they're growing up, that's got to be what this is for them. You know, that weird, quirky kind of film from, you know, the way I look at films from the 90s and 80s, it's like those weird, quirky films with the people with the bizarre hair, and they were like just guys you wanted to be like, you know, when you grow up, because they were just so awesome. They were always just doing awesome things, you know, Deadshot's just being awesome, and all of these people are being awesome. And that's how I think, you know, like that's what the characters in Big Trouble in Little China were doing, you know, like the little Chinaman who was like, could do all the martial arts, you know. I liked him, I wanted to be like him. I obviously wanted to be like Jack, you know, because he was just a badass himself, and he was just always doing things, saying awesome shit. So that's how I think this is going to go down as the movie. I think it's going to take a couple of years once people have moved past the fact that they can get over the fact that the Joker wasn't the main villain. The Joker wasn't in it as much as they want. They get over their their feeling of entitlement. You know, like, oh, I'm going to sue the studio because the Joker wasn't in it enough. Once they get over that and kind of look at this film for what it was trying to be and not what they wanted it to be, I think a lot more people are going to enjoy this movie for what it is. See what time I have here. 1:38. Good. 4. I mean, I've already said it, and it goes without saying, but I'll throw this in just to add some heat to this flame war fire. Amanda fucking Waller, Viola Davis. I am now a fan of this woman after watching the movie. I'd never bothered to watch her TV show. What's it called? How to Get Away with Murder. She's a badass in that. I watched a couple of her other movies. Amanda fucking Waller. Now, here's what I'm gonna say about this. Best comic villain in a movie since the Joker in The Dark Knight. If you can come up, I can't think of any. I cannot think of any. I always thought the comedian from The Watchmen and Ozymandias are very, very underrated villains in a comic book movie. I'd say more the comedian than Ozymandias, but like I think they were really, really underrated in that movie. But apart from that, I cannot think of any other. I mean, you could say Loki, but I really think Loki is highly overrated. I really do. I don't think he's that great. He's just funny, and Tom Hiddleston, he does the lines well. But how's his character that much different from? People say that Ultron was bad, and all he was just this witty, funny guy. But that's basically what Loki is. It's just a series of one-liners. He's this normal, formulaic Marvel stuff that they do. That's what they like to do. So, for me, I don't know. Whatever you want to say, I don't think. I don't think Loki's that great. I don't think Bane was that great. I think Bane was a terrible villain. I think the Zod was a terrible villain. I think it's by now it almost goes without saying that all of the Marvel villains have been a bunch of like a bunch of pussies. They're just a waste of time. They're a waste of time. They may as well not be in the movies. They may as well just have the heroes in Marvel fight themselves, because the heroes in the Marvel movies, I'm not talking about the Sony Marvel movies, or anything like that, or the X-Men. I'm talking about specifically Marvel Disney movies. The villains in those movies, the villains in those movies are so generic that even when I say that, a DC villain is better than them, that's not even a compliment to me. That's just me. Like, my niece is a better villain than the villains in, like, my little niece, when she bullies, her little brother a little bit. She's a better villain than the villain in the Marvel movies, and she's like one of the sweetest girls in the world. But when she bullies her brother, she does more wicked stuff than the guys in the Marvel movies. She usually looks after him, but sometimes that's what I'm talking about. They're that generic, vanilla. Oh, we're not going to, we're not going to offend anyone. One note, terrible villains, and they use such great actors to play them as well. And it's like, why would you even go out and hire the guy who was Captain Zemo, who's a great actor? Why would you go out and hire him to play that part? If you're just going to make it that part, he sucked. So if I say Lex Luthor, for instance, you might go, oh, Lex Luthor, he's terrible. Even if I say Lex Luthor's better than him, or better than the villains in the Marvel movies, it's only because I remember that's all you have to do to be better than a villain in a Marvel movie, is be remembered. So that's it for me. I mean, like, so Amanda Waller, now this is a compliment though. Amanda Waller is one of the best villains I've seen in a comic book movie, period. I think she's up there. I think she's up there in the top 10. I'm not sure where. I can't figure out. I'm not gonna kind of go run over it in my head. But I know that both Jack Nicholson and Heath Ledger's Jokers are in there as one of the top 10s. Maybe if I go for a list, I think the comedian is. What other villains have been really good? I think the guy from Blade was pretty good. The first Blade was a really good villain. Maybe the chick from Dredd. I don't know. There's not a hell of a lot of villains in comic book movies where you're like, wow, that villain was just epic, So You know, I think she's up there in the top 10. She was epic. Everything she did was badass. When she just when they showed that screen of it, like my favorite bit, and this scene wasn't even about her. This is how good Viola Davis is. All she was told to do was, I bet you it says in the script something like, Amanda Waller goes up to El Diablo's water cell, and she shows him the image of him incinerating the people on the in the prison in the prison yard, and then she is supposed to say her lines. She made that scene epic. She just was like, "This is a new." This, you know, like some badass interrogating, like she just made that scene epic, and then she's just standing at the back, like, you know, as the other guy starts talking to El Diablo, he says, "Let me take over," and he starts talking to her, and she's just standing in the back, like she's so pissed off, and she was just epic. She's epic, epic, epic. I couldn't have thought, like, I used to love the Justice League Amanda Waller. She was really, really good, but I think Viola Davis is better than even her, as amazing as she was. So couldn't have done better with Amanda Waller. Now, my fifth thing that I'm going to say, and this is the last thing I'm going to say about the movie, I love the fact that the tone is so different from BVS, and this is what I want from DC, because I think whether they're making bad movies or good movies, the fact, like even Man of Steel, the Man of Steel tone was different. The Man of Steel tone was very different to the Batman v Superman tone, because they had a slightly different tone, and then this Suicide Squad is even more different, you know. And I really think they should keep on doing that. The Wonder Woman movie looks very, very different as well. I really, really think they should keep on doing that. And if we corner them into, you know, a hole where they think, oh, well, these guys, you know, they just want funny, generic movies. If we corner them into that hole, that's what we're going to start getting. You know, DC and Marvel are going to be exactly the same. And what's gonna happen is people are gonna get bored. They're gonna get bored of the dumb villains, the terrible, unmemorable villains. They're gonna get bored of everyone having their one-liners. You know, like that's what we'll be counting for. You know, good character development is that, oh, how many one-liners do I have in this script? Oh, I've got a zinger there. Ooh, ooh. Batman doing his, you know, it's going to go back to that. Like, you know, you've got this great Batman right now in Ben Affleck, and you're going to go back to the George Clooney Batman, because everyone's pressuring them into making these funny comic movies. I mean, comic in the funny sense. It's a bad idea, and it's a dangerous route to go down, and it will kill these movies dead. The fact that DC had a plan that they were going to have more artist-driven movies than Marvel was a good idea, and I think it follows in the structure of what Marvel was initially and what DC was initially, because what was Marvel? Marvel was basically a bunch, like basically Stan Lee and a couple of other guys who made all of these characters, you know, all of these great iconic characters, Captain America, Spider-Man, all of those fantastic characters that they made, Hulk, but they made them all at the same time. They were all these kind of like fun, kind of space age, science kind of fiction kind of characters, you know, with their radioactive spiders and getting hit by gamma rays and you know, Fantastic Four with the cosmic rays from going up in space. They were all born out of this kind of cosmic age from the mind of one person. Whereas DC is very different, because DC, it was different artists who came up with these hero myths that were almost like the kind of Greek, Greek and Roman mythology. These kind of, they were made for kids, obviously, but there was something actually underlying them that was quite universal and archetypical, that that followed that kind of mold of the kind of Herculean hero, or the Achilles style hero, and they created these little children's stories. But what happened is people found out, like, actually there's something a little bit deeper about Batman. There's something a little bit deeper about Superman when you think about it, and you can make all these kind of interesting stories about it. So it was all these different sets of artists who came to who separately created, Wonder Woman. One of them created Flash. One of them created Green Lantern. Another one created Superman. Joe Shuster, Bob Finger with Batman. So they were all very, very different people creating it. So it only makes sense that with the films of DC, rather than having this kind of one figure who's making them all be these kind of generic, kind of safe, enjoyable family movies, that they follow how DC was initially conceived, and have different sets of artists be responsible for creating a universe that is one universe, but at the same time, can have a very, very different aesthetic. I mean, I loved the aesthetic of Batman v Superman. No matter what you want to say, the cinematography was beautiful. It was epic cinematography that made everything look like this, as I said, this Greek mythology. It created this kind of Greek mythology out of these modern comic book characters. Whereas, Suicide Squad is like got this kind of B movie influence, and it's fun and it's youthful and it's kind of this acid drenched, rainbow colored, sexy, energetic, purple rain kind of, electric mess. And I loved it. I thought it was drenched in cool, and it was eye popping, and it was, as I said, that there was, it was tenacious. And I feel like, for the 5 reasons I've told you, that given that even if you thought this movie was bad, the fact that it was attempting to do all of the 5 things that I've told you, having this strong black woman as a villain, one of the best black, even if you don't want to give Amanda Waller the best, one of the top 10 villains, you've got to admit, one of the great kind of roles for a black woman that you'll see in a mainstream movie ever. That's a good thing. The great characters, the diversity of the characters, the style and both the style and the kind of color and texture of the movie, it was made with a lot of heart and a lot of love. Yes, Warner Brothers put their hand in the cookie jar. I don't think they should have, but in the end, I think what we got in the cinematic release, I'm happy with. I'd love to see a director's cut. I think we all would. No one could deny that. Even those who don't like it want to see the director's cut. So, for me, I don't understand. Like, when I first heard that people didn't like Batman v Superman, I kind of understood. When people started attacking Suicide Squad, and I watched Suicide Squad, I was like, okay, there's a bias against DC. There's a bias against DC movies. And I felt passionate, had to write about this, because I think we all want these films to continue. So that's my piece on Suicide Squad. It's the most epic review I know, but that's my feeling towards it. I'm gonna try and cut this down and edit it, and hopefully we can make it shorter.